Well, I saw the Joker 2 trailer. Joker Folie à Deux. No, not Filet a Dude. Although, probably might happen in this movie. But nevertheless, and it's kind of what I would have expected from it. The musical elements are clearly present there. And also the aspects of fantasy are in it, but whose fantasy is it? And of course, in the first film, Arthur Fleck, he wants to be a stand-up comedian. He ultimately wants to follow in the footsteps of the Robert De Niro character, who's basically a Johnny Carson type host, and that's taken from King of Comedy, of course, as the whole thing is taking the templates of the Scorsese films of King of Comedy and Taxi Driver, of course, plays out. In this sequel, where they've long since mentioned the musical attributes to it, and I'm inclined to believe that this is more of the fantasy world of Harley Quinn. Now, there's scenes in the trailer which got a warning thing about YouTube now being skittish about any mention of a certain harmful thing one can do to oneself, and of course it's a callback to the first film, which in that instance may have been real on the part of that woman that he became fascinated with, but then he had this whole fantasy relationship with her, which in the end you realize was all in his head. It never happened like that. So did she actually do the gesture? And yet here Harley Quinn does it, so it's more believable that Harley does it. But then again, is she a fantasy character for Arthur Fleck? But due to the structure of musical and performing on stage and all that, is he real in this version? Is this all Harley's fascination with this guy? And the interesting thing, and you can pick these things apart, and especially in a movie like this, and the other, the first one, of course, where this and that might have meant this and that kind of thing. Because the basic plot is like, well, you're watching this poor troubled man collapse into ruin and turn into a monster at the end. How much of that happened? Did he really inspire this massive riot and all that sort of thing? Perhaps, perhaps not. But ultimately, he ends up in the asylum, and you can understand why and all that. So this one might be where there's a fascination for him by her. And that's, at the heart of the Joker Harley story, which is the strength of that. What they've done with Harley Quinn since has just ruined the character, in my opinion. But that might be the approach here, where if he exists at all, he's second fiddle to her fantasy world about him. And of course, in her, she sees them as some sort of heroes of a musical and a musical duo and that type of thing. But also the elements in it for clues, and I suppose you can watch it again and again to look for others. And you can expect nods to the Batman world and that kind of thing, just for the sake of it, really. Other characters would probably show up. I don't know if they've actually established that Harvey Dent would show up, but he may, because there's courtroom scenes and stuff like that. And that's just a nod to it. But Arkham, we saw it in the first movie, and it looked much cleaner and somewhat newer than it does here. It looks rather dark and run down. And is it even set in the same time? How long has it been? And if it's been really long, is he still alive? That's the thing. Is it just a character in her mind? That kind of thing. Don't know if it would go that far, if it's just, two broken people find one another. And this idea is based on reality, in that you have these, like, even serial killers, and there'll be these women that are just obsessed with them. Send them love letters and all that sort of thing. And in a few cases, actually try to bust them out of jail, or even they do it, and it's all some delusional, misguided romantic feelings for these monsters. And but some girls just really like the bad boys, And such was always the case with Harley Quinn, is that, and you could go into why she's that way and stuff like that, I suppose. But that is the entire story there. And her obsession with this man, of course, is takes her down a dark path, because just the idea that you would be that fascinated with someone like this is dark in and of itself. So the idea of her being taken with a musical fantasy and that sort of thing is fine in and of itself. It's just the worry was that the songs would get in the way, that it would be too much. But if they've crafted it well, I know they've announced, I believe it's the soundtrack album has a lot of songs on it. And I don't know that necessarily means they're all in it. I mean, you got to count the song that's the opening scene, and it's a theme song for the movie, a closing song, and then probably, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 more in the end credits, So that cuts it down somewhat. And then there might be some songs on the radio or something. But ultimately, yeah, Lady Gaga and Joaquin Phoenix are going to perform some numbers here. But I certainly expect that to be fantasy scenes. And since again, the initial plot of the original film, you could take it straightforward, but not entirely, in the sense that, yes, he was that delusional and lost in fantasy, especially when it came to the girl he had a crush on, and then just dreamed this whole thing about her, that it was not true. And so continuing on, that's the thing, is right now is whose fantasy is it? It looks more like it's hers rather than his. But then again, it could just be they both are fantasizing about the other one, But anyway, it's intriguing. It's interesting. Hope it's good. I did like the first one, despite the obvious gimmick, but it was well crafted, and I did like it. This is one of those rare occasions where you can take one of these properties and take it far afield into something else, and do something with it, and really try and be creative with it, which is what happened here with Todd Phillips. A Batman movie with no Batman. Most everything else, there's no Batman. I have very little interest in those things. They almost are always bad or fail. It's the same with the Spider-Man movies with no Spider-Man. Venom was kind of just a fluke, really. I mean, you're seeing a lot of these other movies, and they're just terrible. But in the case of Joker, well, it worked. Don't know if you can do that with other characters, but an interesting approach for Elseworlds films should they continue in that vein, and that really depends on the success of their shared universe to bankroll things like this, so that you can have smaller films that are interesting, but they're not within line with the standard DC Comics narratives. And there's quite a few I could think of that could go a long way with that. In different directions and whatnot. But anyway, looking forward to it. Hope hope it's good. I don't know that it can surpass the first one. On occasion, this does happen with sequels. But hopefully, the main fear is just the songs are too much and it pushes you out of the movie. That might be the case. Hopefully not. But anyway, if that's the idea they came up with to find out, well, how do you do a sequel to a movie like that? And that's a good question. And did they find it? Did they find the story that justifies doing another one? When you've done one that's pretty good. It's kind of, I know you want bankable franchises and stuff, but a lot of times you do more damage than not. And so that's the fear of something like that. But perhaps they did. Of course, I had made the joke early on that, hey, instead of Taxi Driver or King of Comedy, this time just rip off One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And it's him, but of course, the protagonist in that one was not as deranged in any shape or fashion as our Arthur Fleck is here for Joker. So it's one of the few to look forward to. The big one for this year will be, I'm sure, Deadpool, as far as this comic book cinema fair goes. But that's a whole different animal, of course. As for the others, I'm very dubious on that. But anyway, let's hope this one strikes lightning again.